This is the Little Moments Count radio podcast, created in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. Each episode, you'll hear interviews with early childhood experts on how to support the important brain development that takes place in the first 1,000 days of life, just through little moments every day. Learn more at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.
It's a good day to be Indigenous.
Get up, stand up.
They are going to become more brutal.
Because all the hippies were trying to be Indians anyway.
They're going to become more repressive because it's a matter of dollars and their illusionary concepts of power.
Hey, Victor.
We must live in balance with the earth.
And also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee.
I am awake. Welcome to Native Roots Radio Presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Wakanja Hade. Hey, Kadagi, we to all my friends and relatives in four directions. You are listening to Native Roots Radio Presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Robert Pilot. We discuss local, national, Native news and events, and as you know, Chujunk, Native issues are human issues, and human issues are Native issues.
Yes, you are right, Dega. This segment of Native Roots Radio is presented in partnership with Little Moments Count, which is a statewide collaborative focused on helping parents and caregivers learn about the importance of brain development in the first 3 years of life.
Exactly. We're excited to be partnering with Little Moments Count and to host conversations focused on early childhood development, which is a big thing, Haley, for us here as Wendy and I are new grandparents here.
Yeah, we got to care about our next generation. So it's important that we bring guests on monthly with Little Moments Count to talk about how they view the role of early childhood development in creating bright futures and strong communities.
Hey, we have our guest here, Fawn YoungBear Tibbetts, and you're executive director of Minneapolis's first Indigenous urban preschool immersion program. Can you tell us the name of that and welcome?
Sure. So it's the name of the program is Wicoie Nandagikendan. We do Dakota and Ojibwe full immersion early childhood program, and we're located in South Minneapolis. Currently, our classrooms, we partner with the Four Directions at Family Partnerships. Our classrooms are on Bloomington and Lake Street. And then our administrative offices are over here on Franklin Avenue.
Yeah, wow, that's beautiful. Fawn, can you explain the concept of language immersion to our listeners and how it's implemented at your school, specifically for the Dakota and Ojibwe languages?
Sure. There's a lot of research around immersion, dual immersion language as conducted in acquiring a second language. I think our focus is a little different, right? Our mission is to advance Minnesota's Indigenous languages through intergenerational mentorship and immersion strategies in order to nurture a quality and culturally sensitive early childhood education. So we take it a step farther, I think, than most programs. A lot of, Spanish immersion, we have even a Latin immersion program in Minneapolis. Those really follow kind of the state guidelines, and the curriculum is just taught in immersion. The kids may be speaking English to each other. They might be asking. There's no English allowed in our classrooms. So from 15 months until 5 years old, when they're in the classroom, they're exposed fully to Dakota culture and language and Ojibwe culture and language. So doing dual language, but both full immersion. When children are really little, their brain synapses are open and they're learning to communicate. They're learning to communicate through sign language, through English, and through whatever languages are spoken in the homes. And so it's a really great time. Their brains are at a perfect spot to be learning their own languages in a culturally relevant way to them. And so, we, like I said, do things a little different with our immersion classrooms. For example, they do Healthy Hearts, and that's standard Minnesota curriculum at the early childhood level. But we bring in a deer heart and a bison heart. They investigate those hearts. They cook them. They eat them in the classroom. And so we have a cultural competency, I think, that most immersion programs don't necessarily use in their program. It makes us a little bit different.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I know that's beautiful that the languages needed to be spoke there, like a true immersion school, and those receptors in their brains are working overtime in a good way with the two languages. That's beautiful.
What's really great, when we come to the garden, the Dakota and Ojibwe kids are there, and they're talking to each other, and they're understanding each other, no matter what language they're speaking, and it's really, I almost say they're trilingual, right? So the Ojibwe kids will follow directions from the Dakota teacher. The Dakota students will follow the Ojibwe directions. And I think the people, get confused a little bit. They think, well, will my child learn English? We are not at risk of losing English. We only have one Dakota first speaker in Minnesota left. One of our elders just passed away recently, right? And every time an elder dies, we lose a library. So how do we grow the next generation of first speakers? And I think that's where our program and other programs similar to ours come into play. But, the idea is not just speakers. We're informing life views. We're informing future leaders and how they make the choices that they make. And I think the more culturally grounded that we all are, the better off we're all going to be, especially for this community here in South Minneapolis.
Absolutely. And the risk is that we're going to be losing these languages, and we need to, it's red alert time. And I appreciate what you guys are doing with the Dakota and the Ojibwe. And what else are you guys doing with a culture there? I know you talked about the food and talk a little bit about that.
So we, initially had started as a language nest, and then we opened our first classrooms. So our classrooms have now been open for 16 years. We did get a grant a few years back, and it was to look at food sovereignty. It was, engaging kids in the garden. It was about engaging families in harvesting and food preparation. Part of that was that we wanted to serve breakfast, lunch, and snack to our kids, all traditional foods. We ran into a lot of barriers with the USDA. We talked with all of the food service providers here, Trio, Lutheran Services, Gatherings Cafe. I mean, we went everywhere to see who could provide that. There are a lot of barriers. So we just signed a lease for a commercial kitchen, and we're opening the first traditional food child and adult feeding program. Wow. It's an amazing step. It's a lot of work to be doing that work. But it ensures that we can provide those foods to our kids, right? Wild rice, bison, walleye. And then also we have our food sovereignty program. So there's the food service, but then we also have an outreach specialist that's helping families harvest. We're going to be doing a bison butchering class here soon. We're doing cooking classes. So what we figured out pretty quickly was you could provide traditional foods to families, but they may not have exposure to that food. So, we gave out Dream of Wild House food shares to everybody. Most folks didn't know how to cook greens or how to use a turnip, right? Because they haven't seen these traditional foods in a long time. Most of our families came here during relocation, right? So they've lost the connection to their land base, which is also harvesting methods, which is also cooking. So we've kind of stepped that program back and are going into full-on community education, partnerships, cooking classes, butchering classes, so we're kind of expanding that project as well.
Wow, we're here with Fawn YoungBear Tibbetts, and we're talking about some amazing thing with your school, and I can't wait to hear more about it. And wow, I'm so happy to hear about it, Haley. I have never heard about this.
Yeah, it's always a great thing to have for our kiddos and our next generation. So please stay with us.
We'll be right back.
This is Leonard Felt here. I am in Coleman 1, U.S. Penitentiary, and I'm listening to Native Roots Radio.
And we're back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and this is Robert Pilot.
This portion of the show is supported by Little Moments Count. Nearly 80% of brain growth happens in the first 1,000 days, and small moments of interaction like talking, reading, playing, and singing help create the pathways that build a child's brain during this early stage of life. We're here now with Fawn YoungBear Tibbetts.
Hey, welcome back, Fawn. And we have a lot of questions here, and I just have to applaud your work and your community there. It sounds really, really exciting, and you guys are on the right track. So again, Big Peenigi, thank you for being on. Hey, I have a quick question. Can you discuss how access to healthy foods affects children and working to address it? And you guys are working to address this issue.
Well, when kids are fed properly, their brains work better. We also have in our community some of the highest rates of poverty, but also some of the highest rates of obesity and diabetes. So if we can impact choice at this young of an age, then it's just going to be a lifelong benefit for those kids. So, for example, I was in Palm Springs this week. One of the students came with to NIEA, and he's our youngest student, 15 months old. Every day he wanted the blue corn mush that I made for breakfast instead of the chocolate cereal that the older kids were eating. Eventually, this child is going to be an older sibling too, right? Or he's going to be cooking for his family. And he'll have all of that in his wheelhouse, right? So part of it is we did a food assessment of South Minneapolis, and a lot of people did food maps right after the uprising and the closing of the stores. Surprisingly, we live in a food desert. There are more food shelves here than there are grocery stores in our community. But one interesting thing we also found was that every family has a food influencer. And if you can get the food influencer to try something, the younger kids are more likely to try it. And so engaging like at all the levels with the families of cooking, with providing the healthy foods, it was hard. Kids were coming back and saying, hey, we're still hungry. 85% of our students are lactose intolerant, and their parents didn't know how to get the medical recommendation for no dairy for their child. And so these are kind of some of the obstacles that we're helping families with. We actually have a waiver for the school milk process in with the USDA right now. If they deny it, then we'll sue the USDA over that policy in the state of Minnesota that all Native programs should have access or be allowed to serve a non-dairy diet to their students. And so that's kind of a blanket statement that we're working with an organization out in DC on, so that not just our program, but all programs in the state of Minnesota, right? But Dote is our K-8 charter school. School milk is their largest school waste because most kids can't drink it. But they have to provide it to be reimbursed their lunches through the USDA. So we're trying to kind of figure out some of these barriers. And then obviously, highly processed foods aren't good for brain development, right? We're learning about all this red dye number 5 and behavior disorders that come out of that. If kids are eating traditional foods, those are not processed. There are no preservatives. So we don't use gluten in our program. We don't use dairy, and we use no refined sugars. We only use maple syrup and agave nectar in our sweeteners.
That is totally amazing. Fawn, you talked a little bit about food influencers. How about what do you have to do to have the parents buy in? Because I know that's a big portion of influence too. And how's that go on?
So I think a lot of that is opportunities for them to try new foods. So if they know their kids eat it in the program, they're more likely to try it at home. Instead of giving out the food shares like we did last year, we're doing like native HelloFresh boxes. So it's quick, that the meals can be prepared. We'll step it up. There will be a QR code. You can see the chef cook the food. So we're going to be doing a bison taco box. This time we'll make the pico. The next time you're making the pico. Right. And so we're going to level up, and we're scaffolding even for adult learning. Right. And we do that with kids all the time. Say, okay, what is the appropriate age level? Well, what is the appropriate knowledge level for this community? And I've run into some folks, they might not even know how to cook wild rice. And so we're literally starting from scratch. The way I teach my kids about making a salad, right? A good salad should be sour. It should be sweet. It should be crunchy. It should be tart. It should hit all the parts of your taste buds. It shouldn't need ranch dressing on it, right? We should be able to have maple syrup and fire cider and some salt and pepper, and that should be enough. And so giving parents the confidence, and then knowing your kids eat this at school, and you come to field trips, you've seen them eat pozole in the garden. Make pozole at home because they'll eat it. And so I think parents often stay where they're comfortable. We have an apprentice. She is, her daughter is in the program with us. She asked, could I just come and watch you cook? Like, I only use 5 spices in my house. Can I come and watch you cook so that I can learn some of these techniques? So our kitchen is always open. We're always ready to do classes. We have, we do a lot of ceremonial food production. So if there's, a funeral, we often sponsor that. We've got donations from hunters. I can't legally serve that food in the program, but I can serve it for community feasts. And so I think last year we received a donation of about 400 pounds of ground bison. 90% of that went to powwows, funeral feasts, and shaky tents and naming ceremonies. Some went to Sundance for the end of the fast that those guys did up there. Because we get that big donation and then we can't serve it in schools because of USDA regulations again, right? No hunted game. But we can provide that to the community, and I can give that to our families. And I know that's been really appreciative. Right now, ground bison, it's crazy expensive. Roasts are really expensive. Walleye, wild rice is like over $20 a pound. So if I can provide those for free to our families and to our community members, to our elders, and we work across the board, not just with our program. And we're doing catering now as well. So we're using the catering service to increase our scholarship dollars for students, right?
This is amazing, Fawn. Fawn, can you tell, we like a action here, and can you tell our listeners how we can support what you're doing, and if there's a place to give support to your school, and tell us the name again and the spelling so people can find this. This is amazing. Haley, this to me is really amazing what the work you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in March going to be doing a big strategic plan launch that will be virtual so people can attend that. Our organization is Wicoie Nandagikendan, And the website is Wicoie Nandagikendan.org. It's WICOIENANDAGIKENDAN.org. So it's just all one word, Wicoie Nandagikendan.org. We do have a donate button there. Currently, we're the Seward Community Co-op Roundup for October. So if you go to Seward Co-op, you can round up at the end, and that donation comes to our scholarship fund. Also, our kitchen is available. Like I said, any catering events, we try to work within organizations' budgets. So we catered the Minnesota Two-Spirit Powwow for their feast this year. We got really awesome feedback, and we made Indigenous falafels for that. So we're always expanding the menu. We're always testing new things. And that's a great way. You know, if you have an event and you'd like us to cater your event, know that all that revenue goes to 100% to scholarship dollars, as well as obviously donating directly on our page. We'll be on Give to the Max as well. You know, and if you're not local, I would say support an immersion program in your community for your language, wherever you are. All of our immersion schools basically are 100% grant and federal funds. Some get state funds, but very few of us. So, you know, enroll your child, sign up for one of our classes, you know, come see me in Cedar Field when we have that bison hanging up out there.
Wow. Great work, Fawn. And I was at the Two-Spirit Powwow, and I did eat your food. Delicious. Thank you so much for being on. This is amazing. We got to get you on again. This was
we could just do a whole piece on the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, Big Teeny Gigi, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Right on. Hey, we're still here. We are the 7th generation.
And free Leonard Peltier now.
Thanks for listening to the Little Moments Count radio podcast in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. You can find the Little Moments Count radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.